Superintendent of the Oak Creek Franklin School District, and my objective here tonight is just to provide information to you, answer any questions you have. I'm not here to tell you why you should vote, whatever you should vote, or anything like that, but just to answer your questions. Really what we want to do is make sure that people have the information, they know what the referendum is about when they go to the ballot on November 4th. So just want to start by showing you a short video. It's about 4 minutes long that our TV production class at the high school produced, just to give you a visual of the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about.
Most of the schools in the Oak Creek Franklin School District have student enrollments that put them over their capacity.
Oak Creek High School has a capacity of 2,000 students. This year, 2,093 students are enrolled.
The large student population has led to congested hallways and long cafeteria lines. 4 of the 6 elementary schools are over capacity.
These enrollment numbers have created numerous space issues.
At Cedar Hills Elementary, the faculty lounge has been turned into a 3rd grade classroom due to lack of space.
There is no computer lab at Cedar Hills. Computers are transported from room to room on a cart.
Staff collaboration and planning is done in a supply room.
Like the high school, the cafeteria is very crowded and has long lines.
The guidance office is a repurposed supply room. Educational specialists lack permanent space in which to assist students.
The room available is cramped and offers little privacy and lacks a quiet atmosphere.
So why don't we take a look at what the master plan sheet that you hopefully picked up, that long sheet, and you see the same board right here that has that same information on it. what you see is that we have been involved in the master planning process for the past 14 years, really starting in 2000, which is when we passed the referendum for the addition to the high school and the remodeling of the high school. And if you take a look at the sheets that show the enrollments and the enrollment history over these years, you'll notice that in 2002, 2003, we increased by 2.5%. 2003, 2004, we increased by 2.6%. 2004, 2005, we increased by 3.7%. We were growing very, very rapidly. We had 156 new elementary students just in 1 year, which is the third of a school. And that was after having 120 new elementary students the year before. So one of the things we found in 2004, in April of 2004, we did a referendum to build a new elementary school, which is Deerfield Elementary School. And after we passed that referendum to build the school, we decided that we didn't want to be reactive in addressing our space needs. We really wanted to be proactive in developing a long-term master plan. And so the board in 2005 approved establishing a master planning committee and hired an organization to help us with that master plan process. And as part of that, they worked with UW-Madison Applied Population Lab to do the enrollment projection report. And they looked at enrollments going 10 years out. So in 2005, they were showing us enrollments going out to 2015. And it was based on the information from the 10 previous years, looking at the baseline data. They also looked at the SMART growth plans for the city of Oak Creek and the city of Franklin. They looked at birth rates, all the information that they compile, because they do these types of studies nationally for all kinds of school districts and municipalities. And so our committee was looking at that. They were also looking at a facility assessment report that had been done at the same time. We hired an architectural engineering firm to take a look at every one of our buildings to see what we needed to do in order to maintain them. When do boilers need to be replaced? When do roofs need to be replaced? All of those kinds of things. And one of the things that we looked at that time is that the old East Middle School, which was the junior high, which was the original high school when we go all the way back, because of the way it was designed, the way it was built, we were having problems with mold remediation. And we had spent about $3 million in mold remediation over a couple of years. And we were told that that was going to continue just because of the way it was built. So that was one thing the committee was looking at, is we certainly wouldn't try to add on to East. It would just compound the problem. So those were the kinds of things they were looking at. But we also wanted to make sure that we were budgeting appropriately every year to be able to maintain the buildings that we have and keep them in very good condition. They also looked at various options for dealing with the growth long term, for elementary, for middle school, for high school. And as the committee was working on this, one of the things that the question that came up was, we're looking at 10 years out for enrollment. What do we need to plan for eventually? Because when the referendum was passed in November 2000 for the addition to the high school, it increased the capacity from 1,600 to 2,000. But nobody looked to see, well, what would eventually that total enrollment be? So we went back to the Applied Population Lab, and they said that if everything built out in Franklin and Oak Creek, according to the SMART growth plans, you would need to look at 2,800 to 3,000 students if everything was maxed out. So that led the committee to start thinking in terms of, okay, what do we do to accommodate 2,800 to possibly 3,000 students? So those were the kinds of things the committee really spent some time with. They developed 12 different options, looked at pros and cons of those different options, narrowed them down, and on the sheets you have, you'll see what they eventually came up with in terms of recommendations. And this committee was open to anyone and everyone who wanted to be a part of it, so we had a lot of different perspectives represented on that committee. Well, in November of 2006, we had the referendum to build the new East Middle School. And that increased our capacity from 600 to 1,000 students, just by building the new middle school. That accommodated the growth that we were experiencing at the middle schools. Prior to building East Middle School, the new East, we were over capacity by over 100 students at our 2 middle schools. So that helped us deal with the overcrowding in East and West. Yes.
I have a question. You're talking about how many people are enrolled in the grade schools and in the junior highs. How many of these kids are coming from out of the area?
Can I get through? I promise you that information is on here. So if you can wait till we get to that, I think some of your questions will be answered. I will be happy when we're all done to answer any and all questions. But I do know the answer is coming.
Okay.
All right? So basically what we were looking at is after we built East Middle School, it opened in 2008, we brought the committee back together and invited again anyone and everyone that wanted to be a part of that committee in 2010, 2011. So there were some people who had been on the committee in 2005, and then there were a lot of new faces that were a part of this. And in 2010-11, we looked at, again, the Applied Population Lab because they told us we really needed to redo the enrollment projection report every 5 years because they said, you know, the first 5 years they can guarantee will be pretty accurate. The next 5 years they can't be as certain of, so they recommend that you redo it every 5 years. And what we did find is they have been very accurate the first 5 years in both of their enrollment projection reports. And we'll have it redone again in 2015 just to make sure that we are tracking it and being proactive in what we're doing. So then they also provided recommendations for what we can do to address the future, the growth. So one of the things that we again, our schools are over capacity at our elementaries and our high school. So we formed another committee starting in January of 2014 to start looking at now what do we do. And one of the things that we looked at is currently, what's our current status? We own 16.6 acres on Drexel and 20th Street. It's actually, 20th Street doesn't go north of Drexel, but it will because Northwestern Mutual is putting that road in. And that's part of the agreement in all of the land exchanges that we did. They own the land that will be west of our property and north of our property. And so they have a development kind of in the design stages. So one of the things that we looked at is using that land for a new elementary school, because if you look at where our elementary schools are located right now, we only have one that's west of Howell, and it's in the far northern end of our district, Cedar Hills up by College Avenue. We don't have anything else that is west of Howell Avenue for our elementary schools. And Cedar Hills is basically also the only one that's north of Putes. Edgewood is just barely north of Putes, and then all the rest are south of Putes. So it's really an area that we need a new elementary school. It will benefit all of the people in that area. We also own then the Civic Center site here. The City Hall, City Library, and Fire Station 1. Fire Station 1 is being moved over by BMO Harris Bank on Centennial. City Hall and City Library are being constructed on the Drexel Town Square. So the city will demolish those buildings. The community center will stay. It'll be a part of the development for this whole area. But they will be demolishing the other buildings in August of 2015. They'll be all done with the new buildings, and we'll be able to demolish this building. And then the city has to get it ready to be buildable. So not only demolish the buildings, but get the foundations removed and all of the other things that need to be done before we can construct a building on those sites. If you look at the capacity that's identified in that middle column, This is something that we need to report to the state every year. What's the capacity by grade level? That's how the state looks at it. And then we have to put what our projected enrollment is for each grade level, and we have to do this by January of each year. That's the information that the state uses for open enrollment. So when you take a look at it, and you look at the capacity for kindergarten through 5th grade, and then you look at, those are our actual enrollments as of our official third Friday count in September. That's the third Friday count in September is the official data that the state uses for determining our enrollment. Okay? And you'll notice that we are above capacity in every grade level except 2nd grade. 2nd grade is the only grade level that we opened, we had any open enrollment seats. And we didn't fill all of our open enrollment seats. We identified 14 open enrollment seats, and you see that we still have capacity for 7 more. Not everyone that applies for open enrollment accepts it. The only 2 schools we had space available in 2nd grade was Deerfield and Meadowview. So the people in the Caledonia area, Racine area who applied for open enrollment took those spots, but anyone from South Milwaukee, Cudahy, Milwaukee, didn't want to drive that far south. So we have the spots available, we can identify the spots available, but that was the only grade level that we had those spots available. When you take a look at our enrollments, 40% of our classrooms have more than 25 students in them. Some have as many as 28, 29, 30 students in them. We try very hard to keep it at 25, but we don't have the space quite often. Sometimes what we end up looking at hiring an additional teacher to be a floating teacher because we don't have a classroom space for that teacher. So there's still 30 kids in a classroom, but there is some ability to work with them. We also have our 4-year-old kindergarten programs located off-site, and we've gone through 7 different sites in 8 years just because we have to rent the space and we have to have somebody who has the space to rent to us and is willing to accommodate our 4K program. Our high school enrollment currently is at 2,076. In the video, they mentioned 2,093. That's because we do have students from St. Matt's who come to the high school in 8th grade to take Spanish, so they're only there 1 period. So we look at it as 2,076, but at any given time, certainly more than that. We did not identify any open enrollment seats at the high school because we are over capacity at the high school. And we know that the development continues and our population continues to grow. We had 125 more students again this year. When you look at the enrollment projections, you can see that on the left side of the line, that is our actual enrollments from 2000 to 2010. And this was the 2010 enrollment projection report. So what you see here, this is when they did the enrollment projection report. These are 5 different models that they used to determine the enrollment projections. So you can see here, they just mentioned what those different models are, but they all track very closely together. And if you follow up from 2014-15 and you go up and you look at where they projected it, it's a little over 6,500. And if you look at our total, it's 6,556. So they're right on with what they were projecting. So some of the things that we're doing to address the growth, as I mentioned, we are sometimes hiring an extra teacher to be able to assist, especially in teaching the reading and the math sections. We've taken, as you saw in the video, we'll take break rooms, supply rooms, whatever we can to create space for learning spaces. One of the things that they showed in the video, and I know it's a fairly new concept. If you haven't had children in our schools lately, you may not have heard of this, but there's a state and federal mandate called Response to Intervention. And that is a program that's part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that requires us to provide small group targeted instruction for students who are struggling academically. And that's we have no say in the matter. I mean, they're things that we are required to do by the state and federal governments. But it really is intended to assist students to get caught up much more quickly so that they don't need to qualify for a special ed program. If we can catch that early on and really work with them on research-based, very specific interventions that we can monitor their progress and we can adjust accordingly, that's what it's about. But again, we need space for that. So that's where you see those supply rooms being turned into that. That's where you see we've eliminated a lot of workrooms. You also saw in the video, we have some of the people out in the hallways doing some of that because we don't have enough room for it. Some of the other things that we've done at our high school, we have a foods lab, and we have courses that we offer at the high school in food service area that articulate with MATC. So they can get credit here, go into a food service program at MATC to get credit for it. Well, we have one foods lab. We have 7 periods in the day. We had enough students this year signed up for those foods classes to have 10 sections, and we only have enough space for 7. So what we had to do is tell a lot of students they couldn't take the program. More importantly, we ran out of science labs at the high school. A few years ago, we took a regular classroom and made it into a science lab. And now this year, we literally do not have enough science labs for all of our science classes. And one of the things that impacts that is certainly the increased enrollment. There's also a change in the state mandates regarding graduation requirements. It used to be 2 years of science were required, now 3 years of science are required in order to graduate. Now, lots of our students were already taking 3 years of science because it's a requirement for college, but those that weren't are now taking that 3rd year of science. So we've run out of science labs. What we have are teachers doing the classroom instruction in a regular classroom and flipping with other science teachers to be able to use the labs. So we're trying to accommodate as much as we can. You saw in the video, we've taken away computer labs, and we're trying to do as much as we can with computers on carts, for instance. So the question that keeps coming up is, why don't we just get rid of open enrollment? And we can't, because that is a state law, and it's regulated by the state. What we do, as I showed you on that previous slide, is we have to identify our capacity. And then we do not have to identify any seats open if they are, if we are above our capacity. Where we are below capacity, that's where we identify seats. Since our current 2nd grade is the only one that's not at capacity or above, when we post the openings for next year in January, that's the only grade level. It will be 3rd grade then, where we will have seats available. When you start looking at some of the laws that the state legislature has approved in the last few years, they are more interested in expanding the open enrollment program than they are in narrowing it down or limiting it in any way. One of the things they did is they expanded the open enrollment application period. It used to be 3 weeks in February, now it's 3 months, February, March, and April. The other thing is that they now allow exceptions to the open enrollment period at any time during the year if a parent can show that it's in their child's best interest to go to this other school district. And there never used to be any exceptions beyond the open enrollment period. So a lot of the things that are happening that are increasing or opening open enrollment even more. When you take a look at our open enrollment population, half of our open enrollment students were people who were enrolled in our district as residents. They moved out of the district, and by law, they were allowed to continue in the district. And one of the things that the state says is you've already counted them, so they're not additional seats. They've already been attending, they're already there, so therefore, it's not like it's an additional seat, it's an open seat, they stay. But 50% of our open enrollment students actually were enrolled here, residents of the district who moved out. When you take a look at our total open enrollment, it's 5.6% of our student population coming, those are the students coming in. We have 3.8% of our students going out of the district through open enrollment. So it's really a 1.8% difference. Prior to Deerfield being built, we had more students going out through open enrollment than we had coming in, which means taxpayer money was going out to other districts rather than staying here. When you look at the funding for students in our district, a little over half of the funding comes from the state aid, and just a little less than half comes from property tax. And because of that, when a student, you have more students going out than coming in, the money that's attached to that student goes to that other district. So that's half of the money that was raised by taxpayer money going with that students. So one of the things we wanted to make sure we did is that we always had a little more coming in than going out, because we don't want to waste our resources, basically. But we are one of the lowest districts around in terms of open enrollment. There are a lot of districts that are typically about 15% open enrollment. There are some districts that are a third of their population is open enrollment. St. Francis, for example. I believe Union Grove is the other one that's about a third of their population is open enrollment. So we are very, very small in our percent of open enrollment students. And while we're talking about open enrollment, the other question that I get asked a lot is, why don't the Franklin students that are in our district go to school in Franklin instead of being here? One of the things that you need to look at is that, and we just got the valuation figures on Monday, 17.5% of the value of our district comes from the Franklin portion of our district. 8% of the students come from the Franklin portion of our district. The biggest part of the Franklin portion of our district is business and industry. If the Franklin portion were not part of our district, the Oak Creek taxpayers would pay significantly more.
Maybe it's time to give Franklin what is due to Franklin.
It's not due to Franklin, and let me explain.
Keep on doing, at the end we're going to discuss.
Okay, but let me explain. Milwaukee County used to run the school system. It was the Milwaukee County school system. When Milwaukee County decided to break it into smaller districts, they drew the boundary areas. And that was before the city of Franklin was formed, or the city of Franklin. Neither Oak Creek nor Franklin were cities at that time. They looked at where students were, they looked at where schools were, and they drew the boundaries. And so one of the things that we look at is that, again, it's not a matter of giving something back. You would lose a tremendous amount of tax base by giving it out, as opposed to, and all of your taxes would go up. The Franklin portion of our district also, when you take a look at the number of students coming in, we're getting twice the value, over twice the value than we are the students.
Okay.
So, again, in January, the board established this facilities planning committee, again, open to anyone who wanted to be a part of it. And they reviewed the master plan. They start looking at what was the next phase of the master plan, what were going to be the design components of implementing that master plan, what were going to be the cost estimates of implementing that master plan, the construction costs, the borrowing costs, those kinds of things, and then what would be the tax impact in implementing that. We looked at the timelines, all of those kinds of things. And the general consensus of the committee was that we build the new elementary school on Drexel and 20th, that we build in this site a ninth grade center that could be an extension of the high school, and that we build an auditorium that was connected to that new ninth grade center. So I'm going to have Sal, who's one of the architects from Epstein Ewan Architects, and a father of children in our district, explain the concepts for the two plans.
Okay, I'll be talking a little bit from an architecture and site planning standpoint about the referendum questions. I'll be talking about the elementary school, the secondary school, and the conceptual auditorium site plan. This is the new elementary school site. As you can see, this is West Drexel Avenue, and this is the future 20th Street. It's hard to imagine what this is right now because it's a field. But anyway, the building, you can see here in orange, will be in the middle of the site with the parking lot on the south portion and the playgrounds and the activity fields on the north end of the site. It's an energy efficient design. What does that mean? It means the building's long direction is situated in the east-west direction to take advantage of the sun and all the natural light that accompanies that orientation. Buses are separate in yellow from parent traffic, and that alleviates a lot of congestion that you see at a lot of current schools, and it's also a lot safer for the students being picked up and dropped off. There's approximately 130 parking stalls for staff and visitors, so there's ample parking. And also, stormwater control area is safely designed away from all the different playgrounds. Inside the building, it is a school that will house grades 4K through 5, and it's about 500 students. On the right side is academic areas, core classes, things like that, and then you also have other core functions like the gym and cafeteria over here. The gym is also sized appropriately to allow for spectator seating, things like that during events. It also has a secure entrance design. Now, what does it mean by secure entrance? It means that if a person wants to come into the school, they're required to walk in and see the administration office and basically declare what they're doing. Nobody can walk into the school and just not see anybody, so it's a very safe design. Again, the energy efficiency portion of it, 2 floors is more efficient from an energy usage standpoint than one large one-story building. It's approximately 83,000 square feet. The second part of the first question is the construction of a 9th grade center. As you can see here, we are at the existing community center that is to remain. The existing high school is located here. Putes is here and Howell is here. Again, the energy efficient design, the building is orientated in the east-west direction to take advantage of natural light. North Knights Place is no longer a through street, and that does a couple things. That separates the bus traffic, again in yellow, from the parent in purple. Creates an overall net gain of parking spaces to the north here. And again, it's for the safety of the kids that the bus and the parent drop-off are separate from each other. The nighttime entrance to the second question, the auditorium, and the other core functions like the gym will be on this side, and stormwater retention will be located on the south portion of the design if needed. Inside, the building is designed for 750 students. As you know, anybody who's walked into the high school, it's a secure entrance design. That means you walk in the first set of the doors, you have to walk into a single door and see the office before you can proceed into the school. That will also happen in this approximate location for this 9th grade center. It is connected to the existing high school by a covered, heated, open walkway. The nighttime functions, which will occur on this half of the building, can be locked off from the academic portions, which will be located on the south side. And the building also includes all sorts of core function classroom spaces. You'll have a 2-court gym, a cafeteria, a kitchen, all the things that 9th graders need as part of their curriculum. The second question is the 800-seat auditorium, which is located here north of the site in blue. The auditorium is really meant to seat one grade at a time, approximately 800 students, so it has that capacity for every grade to be there on its own at one time. And it's a auditorium, its functions are really geared towards the high school curriculum aspect of it, so it doesn't have a lot of glitz and glamour. It has a lot of the core functions required for a successful and efficient auditorium, so that things like stages, orchestra pits, storage rooms, things like that. And that square footage is approximately 28,300 square feet. All this has costs associated with it, so I'm going to turn it over to Chad. Thank you.
Okay, so how do we derive the costs of a project like this? In essence, what we do is we've put together construction budgets, estimates, and we base those off of the schematic drawings that you see here, as well as the program and square footage that Sal talked about. So question one actually has two components to it, as we've discussed. The secondary school at the high school site, and then also the new elementary school on Drexel. Those break down dollar-wise, the secondary school on the high school site to approximately $42.2 million, and the new elementary school approximately $16.8 million. So that represents the two pie charts here in blue. And then question two is the auditorium, and the cost for the auditorium breaks down to $7.3 million. So what's included in those costs are overall total project costs. So there's a construction cost component to that, as well as an owner or additional fees and owner purchases, as we call them, cost. We factored in all of those costs to get to these values. How do we come up with those? We use historical data from other schools that we've constructed, as well as recent projects that we have underway. So the costs include the construction, which is easy to comprehend, but it also includes other things like a project contingency. A contingency are dollars that are allocated for unknowns. So if we were to encounter, for example, bad soils on one of the sites, there's going to be costs associated with that. We have a contingency to utilize for that. If the contingency is not used on the projects, that contingency is returned back to the district. And what they've done in the past is they've lowered the debt and offset the borrowing costs. Additional fees and owner purchases, some examples of that are professional fees, state and local fees and permits, soil and geotechnical services, FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, utilities during construction, and insurance costs. We have based, all of these costs are based on 2014 rates and costs, and then we have inflated them by 4% to accommodate for inflation. And then lastly, all of these costs do assume a 2015 construction start. We've also put together preliminary project schedules for these projects. So assuming a successful November referendum, there is a design stage, so these concept drawings get refined, and there's a design stage from December of 14 until September of 15 to complete the drawings. Once those drawings are completed, we do go out and bid all of this work. So the numbers that we've put together right now are budgets, are estimates. Once we have the actual construction documents and the specifications, all of that goes out to the subcontractors and is bid out competitively. In June of 15, we start the new elementary school, and that's scheduled to be completed in July of 16. We cannot start the high school, the 9th grade project, until the city has completed their project, moved off the site, and demolished the buildings here. That demolition is scheduled to be in August or September of 15. So we have actually two different schedules for the 9th grade project. We're either going to start that, projecting to start that in November of 15, in the fall of 15, or we may choose to wait until the spring of 16. That's going to be dependent on what does the weather, what does the winter look like, what's the market condition, how do the bids look like they might come in. Either way, those will be done in August of 17, that project. And that would include the auditorium if that were successful. successful in the referendum. So in summary, the new elementary school will be occupied in August of 16, the ninth grade school no later than August of 17, and the auditorium no later than August of 17.
So basically, when the committee met this spring from June, or this winter from January to June, they took a look at, do we have one question, two questions, three questions? Do we ask a question now, come back in another year or two with another question? They really looked at what would be the priorities. So what they determined is that the elementary and the secondary should be combined into one question because they're both needs. And they're both high priority needs in the sense that we're over capacity at the elementary and we're over capacity at the high school. And one of the things they were considering is if we did one now and then came back in another year or two with another one, costs would be up. People might feel like, you know what, how many times are you going to come with a referendum? When are you going to be done? It's like, but this way we can present it as, here's the complete picture. Here's the long-term plan. They also looked at making the auditorium a second question because while they saw great value and benefit in an auditorium for the school district as well as the community, and we're talking the entire school district, not just the high school that would be using the auditorium on a regular basis, but that while it had value and benefit was more of a want than a need. So they recommended that be a separate question. Those are the reasons why. And then they took a look at the timing of the referendum. One of the things that the state law requires is that we only can do a referendum during a general election. So that would be a November election, and we only have November elections in the even-numbered years, or this April election each year. So one of the things that we're looking at is November 2014, April 2015. The next opportunity would be April 2016. And one of the things they were looking at is that if it were approved in November versus April, it's a much more logical construction timeline. Deerfield Elementary referendum was passed in April of 2004, and it was extremely difficult to get the building ready by August of 2005. We did everything we could. We had people working overtime, triple overtime, whatever we could to get the project finished in time. So November gives us the space we need to really be able to do it logically. The other thing they looked at are costs will just continue to increase. So if we did it now and we know the costs, rather than, again, in 2 years, the costs would be higher than they would be now. And they also looked at the fact that there is a higher voter turnout in November with the gubernatorial election, so more people would have a say. People wouldn't be feeling like they didn't have an opportunity to vote on it. And then we had Robert W. Baird look at what the tax impact would be. Robert W. Baird did the tax impact estimates for the high school referendum in November of 2000, for the Deerfield Elementary referendum in April of 2004, and East Middle School referendum in November 2006. In all of those cases, they overestimated what the tax impact would be. They would much rather be conservative, and then when all is said and done, you look at it and you say, oh great, the taxes were less than what they said, rather than to underestimate and have it be more. In all of the 3 previous referendums, it has been less than what they estimated it to be. When you take a look at these estimates, they're using a 4.5% interest rate. Well, we just refinanced in February and had a 2.037% interest rate. So this would be more than double the interest rate we just got in February, which is highly unlikely, but they really wanted to be able to estimate it very conservatively. The other thing in their estimates is they looked at little to no growth of the tax base. And so if we have an increased tax base, that just lowers the taxes for everybody because it's spread out among more taxpayers. So they're, again, being very conservative by not assuming that the tax base is necessarily going to grow. When you take a look at it, and you see this is based on $100,000 of property value. For question number 1, which is the elementary and the secondary, they're estimating at the most $77 per year as a tax increase. If you have a $200,000 property, you would double it, it would be $154. $300,000 of property, it would be $231. That would be the most you would be paying on your taxes for the elementary and secondary. If you take a look at question 2, which is the auditorium, it would be $9 a year at the most on your property tax for the auditorium. And $18 and then $27 if you have a $200,000 or $300,000. So really when you take a look at question 1 and question 2, and you combine it for $100,000, the most you would be paying for the entire project is the $86 a year. And one of the things we wanted to point out too, if you take a look at the 2000 referendum, and you look at the projected cost, it was $38.6 million. Our actual costs came to $35.8 million. So we had over $2 million less than we had projected it to cost us. That went down directly into paying the debt down. We just put it right back into paying off the debt. Same thing in 2004 with the referendum for Deerfield Elementary School. Projected cost $2.3 million, actual cost $11.4 million. So a savings of almost $1 million. And then with East Middle School, projected cost $47.7, actual cost $44.7 million, so a savings of a little over $3 million. So when you look at the difference in those costs, just from the projected and the actual, we had over $6 million in savings that went down to paying off the debt. Then when you take a look at some of the refinancing and restructuring we've done, we've saved another $2 million by lowering the interest rates. And so we've saved over $8 million of what we had projected the cost to be. When you take a look at the amount of debt that was left as of January 1st, 2001 from West Middle School, West was built in 1993. At that time, there were no requirements for referendums, but we did have costs associated with borrowing for building West Middle School. When you take a look at what was left as of January 1st of 2001, and then you take a look at the amount of debt that was approved in the November 2000 referendum, the April 2004 referendum, and the November 2006 referendum, we had accumulated $91.9 million in debt. However, we've already paid off over $52.9 million that we have already paid off in the last 14 years of that 91. So we have $39 million left. That was as of June 30th at the end of our fiscal year. That will be down another $2 million by next June, just because of how we've been paying off the debt. We are very aggressive in how we pay off the debt, knowing that we've got to, with additional needs in the community, we needed to be prepared to take on any additional debt. One of the things that we took a look at when we refinanced in February, we had to get a rating from Moody's in order to issue the bonds. And they gave us a rating of a AA2, which is one of the highest ratings a school district can get. One of the highest not only in the state but nationally. And one of the things that we looked at is they identified two main reasons why we had such a high rating. The first one was strong financial operations with healthy reserves. And then the second reason was the manageable debt burden. So they've looked at at how we've managed our money, how we've handled our debt, the fact that we have been very fiscally responsible in doing that, very aggressive in paying down that debt, gave us a much higher rating, which led to a lower interest rate. When you take a look at the debt load, and I just took the ones that were just our neighboring districts, other than Milwaukee and Racine, because they're much larger than we are, but all of our other neighboring districts. And you take a look at the debt load. Oops, sorry. Wrong little device. Whoops. When you take a look at that, and you start comparing us to the other districts, we are down here towards the bottom. Only Cudahy and Muskego Norway have a lower percent debt value than we do. Even with approving the even approving the referendum, our debt load will not increase that to the higher levels of our neighbors. The other thing that we get asked a lot is, how does this affect our operational budget? And if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, those are our personnel costs, everything associated with salaries and benefits. The yellow line is the year that we opened East Middle School. I'm sorry, Deerfield Elementary School. The yellow line is the year we opened Deerfield Elementary School. The green is the year we opened East Middle School. And if you look at the graph, the percent of money that we have spent on personnel has not changed much at all. There's very little variance. It's right between 76 to 78% of our budget each year. So even after we opened the schools, it did not increase our personnel costs in relation to our operational budget. When you look at the graph on the right, or the chart on the right, that's facilities and maintenance costs. And again, yellow is the year that we opened Deerfield. Green is the year we opened East Middle School. And in fact, you'll see after we opened East Middle School, the costs actually went down. Part of that was not paying for the mold remediation anymore. Part of it is that the newer buildings were much more energy efficient. So you take a look at, and those costs for facilities and maintenance are generally right around 7 to 9%. And that is about 85% of our budget when you take a look at those two things. The way the financing, school financing works is that the state assigns us a revenue limit per pupil. It's not based on how many facilities we have, it's based on how many pupils we have. And we have been able to manage the budget very efficiently all these years so that our costs don't vary much at all. We don't see a tremendous amount of increase in personnel costs or facility costs or anything else. One of the things when we build the new buildings is we shift students and then the staff go with the students. Because we're overcrowded, we need to make room. We need to bring down the student enrollment in all of our buildings. So as we move students, we move staff, we move furniture, all of those kinds of things to be able to just spread it out over more buildings and have more space. Okay. So you know